Could I please ask the speakers of this afternoon to join me here? And we also, I hope, by now should have 2 more guests this afternoon. We have 2 MPs here from the Swedish Parliament. We have Annika Liljesmets from the Green Party, very welcome, and Desiree Petrus from the Swedish Christian Democrats, to broaden our scope. Please, you can take a chair here.
Vad sa du?
I just have a question for Anna-Lisa Conte, just for clarification first. I didn't really quite understand the word you were using when you described your big Kenya program, the 80,000 people. What kind of aid were they receiving before you started the cash transfer program?
In kind.
In kind. I don't understand that. What is it?
Food.
Physical food. Okay, so those were the maize bags were. So I was just wondering, why has it been difficult, do you think? Are donors less enthused with this new system than they were when you were doing it the old-fashioned way and handing out bags of food? Take the microphone.
Are you asking this question to me or to the
Yes.
donors?
No, I just thought you seemed troubled by the fact that you have such good results, but that the enthusiasm, if I interpret you correctly, amongst the donors is not so big, and I'm wondering why.
Well, I think that there are multiple reasons. Perhaps the major reason is the current economic situation, of course. But it is also true that despite the fact that cash and voucher transfers have shown so far to be good ways to provide assistance, most of the projects are really at a small scale, and we don't really know yet if those positive results can be multiplied in a linear way with increasing the project. So I guess that perhaps there is also the fear that by launching very large-scale cash interventions, we may create some negative impacts that perhaps this is not really visible at a small scale, like, for instance, inflation.
What could that be? Some kind of distortions or?
Inflation that is more at economic level. And the second one, it is, I think, a little bit of skepticism about how people will use the cash grant at large scale.
My thought would just be that there is something, again, where there's a lot of morale in this with aid, that there's something like handing out, you're hungry and I give you food, but what you're doing with those voucher system, it's more what we call in Swedish help to self-help. I mean, it's enabling people. Do you think that some donors are not sort of willing to make this sort of leap in looking upon things?
No, I don't think so. I think that the donors really see the benefit of this. But you should also consider that, for instance, WFP assists on a yearly basis between 70 and 100 million people worldwide, with a budget that is around $5 billion. It's impossible overnight or even within a short period of time to shift that type of assistance into cash or vouchers.
Mm.
I think that all the economists that are sitting in this in this room will say that the market in developing countries is not ready to absorb all that demand. So we have also to progress gradually. I personally believe that we should use cash and vouchers to reinforce the market, and not to take an approach that either the market is already developed and we use these tools. If the market is not sufficiently developed, we go home or we provide in kind. I think that we have a role also in developing those markets through the use of cash and voucher transfers.
Okay, thank you. Laura, are you with us now? Can you nod? Can you hear us? Yes? Great. So we are now in the panel where you're one of our welcome guests, together with two politicians from the Green Party and the Swedish Christian Democrats. And also we have a representative from the Swedish Embassy in Kigali, Mr. Lars Johansson. There she went. Okay. The technicians are going like this, so I think we'll just continue. I actually have one question for you who, Lars, who have been working in Rwanda now. We all know that Rwanda is very sort of strong on requesting what they want from you as donors and not. Yet we also know that almost 50% of Rwanda's economy is dependent on aid. How do they look upon this with building social infrastructure, cash transfers with their own money? Or are they doing this, do you think, because that they can finance it through donor money?
They do already provide a lot of resources for social protection from their own revenues, tax revenues. So even if the donors fund a lot, 50% or a little bit more, I mean, the rest is funded by government Rwanda own resources, which is also substantial. I think the government of Rwanda is opportunistic. It does what it can with the resources available. If it comes in terms of donor funds, they are happy and they will use it to work on social protection and development. At the same time, government of Rwanda is painfully aware of that donor funds are unreliable, and they are very impatient to get away from aid dependency and working hard on that. They recently launched a development fund, Agaciro Fund, it's called, with voluntary contributions from Rwandans in Rwanda and in the diaspora, as a means to speed up the move away from aid dependency. But Rwanda knows it is able to use resources well, so they of course welcome any resources they can get as long as they can.
So there is a
them.
genuine interest in that country to sort of own this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the countries we've been talking about today have been sort of hasn't been the most fragile, lowest income state. So. I want to ask you, Annalisa Conte, since you're active in so many countries, when it comes to cash transfers in the most fragile states, what role do you see that other actors than yourself maybe can play when there isn't a social protection system at all?
Well, I think that as we were seeing in Laura's presentation, 75% of the households or there was a 75% of countries within the sub-Saharan Africa that they are not covered by any type of social protection. Definitely, that is an area where we as international agencies and donors, we should play quite an active role to engage government in bringing in this point in their agenda. But of course, there are a number of competing priorities that these countries seem to have. Just to give you an example, I was recently in South Sudan, the most recent country, and the government felt that they have so many priorities on their agenda, and for them this type of social protection is definitely not the one to be tackled in the next 3 or 6 months.
And I have a friend who just came back from there. She said it was hell on earth, the slums in Juba. She said it was. Okay, so the question is, and I want to welcome our politicians here and also give you a chance maybe to, in a more open way, give your sort of position on this, what we're discussing today, and that is if cash transfers maybe might be the new thing to help to spread income or spread prosperity, but also help the poorest to get some level of subsistence. And we've been hearing a lot of reports today that the examples are from Namibia, from Rwanda, that it really is actually working quite well. But it's a big step, and one of the questions I want us to have with us now is that are we creating a new kind of dependency, going from aid to social welfare? Are we stigmatizing the poorest by sort of wanting to introduce this system again? Is this the way forward? So if we start with Desiree Petrus from the Swedish Christian Democrats, which is also one of the government parties at the moment. What's your position?
Thank you very much for the invitation to come here and to be here today and to discuss this. I think it's a very important issue actually, because I think we all want to have a development aid that is really working. And I mean, it's the money from the citizens of Sweden that we are handing over. And so I think it's very important that we really scrutinize whatever we do with our money. And actually, the first time I heard about the cash transfer was when I visited the World Bank a couple of years ago, and that was the first time I ever heard about it. And so I think it's very important that the Swedish Church is bringing these questions up here in Sweden, so we start to have the debate and discussion, how can we implement it, and because I think it is something that is going to increase, but how is it going to be? And of course, I think it's very attractive to have, instead of giving money to someone who gives you the wheat, you give the money to someone who can decide what wheat do I want to have. And it gives some empowering to poor people that I think is very important. But also we have to, of course, talk about dependency. As you said, what kind of dependency does this create? How does we affect the market system? How is this a long-term sustainable system that we are creating with these? And also, how are we going to deal with private and public responsibilities? And of course, I think the dependency we always have to discuss, actually, because is it sustainable that we, with our development aid, go into a country and create some sort of dependency? When is the ownership from the country? When are they going to take over? And how do we cooperate in a way that is create a development that is sustainable in this country?
So given many tools in the toolbox, how big an emphasis would you like to give on cash transfers?
I think it could be very great in the future if we do it in the right way. So I think it's something that we are going to deal with in the development aid. But we have to, I think, first have to be clear where we are heading and how we are going to scrutinize and follow up the effects of the systems. And I know that some now are starting up and doing this, so I couldn't say how fast it's going to be, but I think it's going to increase quite a lot in development.
But what problem would you see in explaining to the Swedish taxpayers that we are now going to help build social security systems and giving sort of money for free for people in countries, given the reforms and the tightening up that also your government partners have been doing here in Sweden?
I think, I mean, we can have people saying it's okay when we do it in a way that's it's more effective maybe than just handing over money, and we don't know if it's going to be efficient or not. And if we also have some sort of demands and someone who is maybe working and then we give them money for doing that. So I think we can make it, I mean, reasonable for the taxpayers. I mean, we have 35 billion Swedish crowns today that is in the development aid. So it's a lot of money, and I think that everything that we can tell people of the Swedish citizens that this is going to be in a better way and it's going to be more sustainable, then we're going to have it okay.
It's almost as much as our defense budget today.
Pardon?
Yeah, it's almost as much as our defense budget.
Yeah.
Because we have the 1% goal. And since Swedish economy is doing really well, it's a lot of money now. Okay, thank you for now. I just want to say that Laura is with us and she can hear us and she can answer on telephone. So I'm just sort of, if you forgive me, Annika, I will just give her a question. Also to find out what your position is, if this rising interest in social protection, is it mainly donor-driven, or do you also see a more growing genuine interest amongst the recipient countries?
So, thank you so much for inviting me to be on this panel. I hope you can all hear me. Is it working?
We can hear. The sound is not so good, so if you could keep your answer brief.
Very well. I think there is a strong interest from the client countries themselves. In fact, many social protection initiatives have not come from the donors, but have in fact come from the countries themselves. You can see examples from Mexico, Brazil, Rwanda, and Ethiopia, who have some hallmark programs that have very a strong root in the national government priorities.
Okay, thank you so much. And we also, your presentation did work very well up until we lost you. So thank you for that. It was a great overview that you gave us. So I just now want to also ask our MP, Annika Lillemets from the Green Party, what is the Green Party's more general position? Do you see this as the road forward to start building social welfare structures, cash transfers to the poorest?
Yes, definitely. Thank you from us too that you have invited all the interesting guests here and that we have this meeting today and we have this discussion, and I hope it will continue, and not just discussion but action. So we welcome this very much, this discussion about social protection and cash transfers as an initiative to tackle poverty and vulnerability. We believe that the cash transfers and including unconditional basic income is a key to development, not least in low and middle income countries where there's high levels of informality in labor markets, as many have talked about today. I think it's striking and very encouraging hearing about the examples from Ochivero in Namibia and also Rwanda and other places. Reality is... Oh, sorry. reality. It's hard to argue against reality. It did work in Ochivero when people were trusted to decide for themselves what they wanted to do with the money they had. There was talk about dependency, that some are worried that if you do get a grant, a cash in your hand, that you will be lazy, you will just waste the money, you will be dependent, you won't be able to form your life. But no man is an island, or no woman is an island either. We're all dependent of each other on this earth. And it's just a matter of whom we depend on, like the women in Ochivero or the men in Ochivero who are dependent on selling themselves as prostitutes, perhaps, or just working for farmers for almost nothing. They were dependent. Now they may be dependent of the state, of the common authorities and the society, if this will proceed, this basic income grant. And that is, of course, a much better dependency. We all depend. It's a matter of emancipation. And we could also think of pre-distribution instead of redistribution. I think you asked Erika in the morning, who should eat? Only the ones who labor, and who shouldn't eat, and who isn't entitled to the fruits of our commons, natural resources and everything. I think we need to think in orders of pre-distribution instead of redistribution, like they do in Alaska, for instance, where corporations or anyone who wants to extract natural resources, they have to pay a tax or fee, and that is handed out to the inhabitants of Alaska, except from a part that's kept for social services.
But could I visited the Ochivero project, and there's an amazing German couple, Claudia and Dirk Harman, who have been, been instrumental, I would say, in running it. And they were also talking about the dignity of being a human being, that we all have right to live in dignity, and those people in Ochivero were beneath dignity because they had virtually nothing. But there were also problems, like, for instance, I'm struck by that all the examples that our speakers have given us today, all the quotes we've been given have been by women who have been benefiting. And what we see in Ochivero is a lot of the men want to go and buy liquor when the money is handed out. So they are closing, if you correct me if I'm wrong, but they are closing the liquor store the day of the handout of the money in order for the women to get a chance to get their hands on the money so they can use it for other things. And we all know that there are problems like this. And what would you do as a politician if one of our tabloids like Expressen go down to Ochivero and say, look, here they are drinking alcohol on social welfare with Swedish money? I mean, how would you as a this could happen. How would you as a politician handle that situation?
Well, I don't know. I can't control what Expressen, the tabloids, write, but I would certainly ask them to go and also talk to the village council that the inhabitants in Ochivero organized. But as I understand it, Uhuru, if he's here, could verify this. I think they organized it. No one told them to organize, but they did, and they spoke with the local pub owners that they shouldn't serve alcohol these days, which I think is very good. That I would like to tell the Swedish taxpayers. And Namibians and Swedes and people everywhere are quite much the same. We have to choose. Either we distrust everyone and say, okay, they have to prove worthy, we want to control, we know what's best for these poor people, they cannot handle their lives. And then we have the risk that, of course, some of them will buy alcohol and they will do bad things, just like in Sweden.
Laura, are you with us? I'd like to ask you a question. Lars Johansson from SIDA, who lives in Rwanda, he was talking about the need of long-term commitments, that's really something that those countries need. Now, you might know that Sweden, amongst many other countries, have chosen to sort of freeze the support to Rwanda right now because of the allegations that they're supporting the M23 rebels in Congo. What does this tell you if we are sort of moving into a new area now of aid, with talking about cash transfers and a lot of people sort of becoming dependent on that, and then it could just suddenly stop? Did you hear? It's too difficult a question. Okay, sorry. I will allow comments from the floor, but I will pass the question on to you. Microphone, please.
Yeah.
What will happen? What will happen to SIDA support, to Romanda's cash transfers?
That I don't know. I don't know if my colleague from the coalition can enlighten us. But yeah, we are waiting for a decision or more clear guidance on this from the Swedish government currently. But yeah, going back to long-term commitments, this is not specific for social protection, and I don't know if it's more of a problem for social protection interventions than other interventions, maybe less. I don't know if there has been any research on this. I don't know what the theory is really behind this reasoning that if I get support 1 year or 1 day, that would somehow make me used to have that support, so I would suffer more if I lose it than if I didn't get it at all. I don't think that's the case. If I get it 1 year and don't get it the next, that's much, much, much better than not getting it at all. So that's not an argument for not going into supporting social protection initiative if the government we are supporting wants to implement such programs. I think for an infrastructure program, for building a dam, for example, you can not just only build half the dam. That's a waste of money. It won't do any good. But social protection is different. Support 1 year is better than no support at all.
But I also have to ask you, Anna-Lisa Conte, what you think about that, because if I understood you correctly this morning, Solomon, you also spoke about the importance of graduating from this kind of program, that it maybe should not be going on eternally. So what is your thinking at the World Food Programme on this?
Yeah, but I think that we all try to help people in order to make them, first of all, resilient, and second, to build their own capacity to go on by themselves. I don't think that none of us is trying to assist people for the sake of assisting them throughout their life. Of course, if we start a program for which we expect to see results within, I don't know, 3 or 5 years, and after a couple of years something happens and that program has to stop, we will never see those results. It would have carried some benefits for the initial phase, but then we may even lose those benefits. So it is really completely different, the approach, when we intervene because there is, for instance, an emergency and we need to save lives now, immediately, and our resources are required immediately and typically for a short period of time. But if we want to build the resilience of those people, we have to go for longer-term programs, and perhaps even to take into account that during the life of a project there might be this type of situations, and maybe to preempt what one can do in order to lose all the benefits.
Okay, so 3 to 5 years. So I would like to ask our Swedish MPs, given Sweden's history, both as a donor but also that we have a very strong case and experience of developing social protection systems, do you think that we have a special contribution to give in this debate? Desiree, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that that there's a lot of expectations from Sweden to be like a partner in discussion how to develop social security systems within different countries, because we have the long, as you said, the long experience of building security systems. And we all know that it has to be sustainable also with incomes, and in the economy it has to be income to have possibility to pay out. So taxes, for example, is something that a lot of countries, I visited Pakistan a couple of years ago, and they don't have a tax system where they take in taxes, so they cannot have a social security system. And so the countries, and I think the development aid from Sweden, especially those who goes like budgetary support, should go to create systems for tax revenues and how you create tax systems that are okay, but also how you create an economy that is sustainable. And if you look at for Rwanda, I visited last year, and I mean, they don't have much of their own natural resources. They have natural resources in DRC that they're using, but they don't have own resources. And that's a problem, because they need to develop an economy that is going on its own. So I think that we can help with these systems, but not just handing over money, but also how to create a sustainable economy and also create tax systems, for example.
And just a short question, in what way do you think that we can, is this a commercial possibility for Sweden? Because, I mean, is this a situation where we can, I see in my travels in Africa and Ghana, Brazilian consultants selling the Bolsa Familia model to African countries. There's a lot of dynamism south-south, but do you think that Sweden has anything sort of is it a commercial possibility for us?
Yeah, I think we have been, for Japan, for example, they have been traveling to Sweden looking at the elderly care system for ages, and that is something that we sometimes is done for free, and a lot of it we're doing for free. But those countries who can pay, they should pay, of course. But from the beginning, for some of the countries, maybe we just need to help them to create a system how to take in the money that but some of they don't want to do, because rich people are opposing to having these systems because they don't want to pay. So I think coming back to the ownership, that is something that has been for the 3 last big conferences on developing aid, has ownership, has been the word that is coming back all the time. That the countries and the leaders of the countries have to be responsible towards their own citizens. And in my point of view, also without human rights and democracy, that is also not going to be a sustainable system. So when I visited Rwanda, you could see some people, they had been like a corporate, working together in corporate, but they were very poor, and they were seemed also very frustrated because they were not able to have the political rights as well. So that is also something. You have to develop the economies, but also empower the political rights in these countries so they can decide upon their future. I think that is very, very, very important.
Okay.
That we also have that challenge towards the leaders of the different countries.
Great, thank you. I want to ask you the same question, Annika, how you see if Sweden has a specific responsibility in contributing models and know-how and sort of pursue this idea of social welfare systems.
Yes, absolutely, because of our experience. And I must say I feel a bit awkward that Sweden hasn't yet taken fully responsibility to do this. And I'm happy to hear that the Syria from the government party, one of the government parties, says that this is important with the social protection. So I hope this will be the case now. What I want to mention too is one very concrete measure we could take up again, which is the master programs, educations in our universities, where many students from all over the world would come and study from different professions, and it would be a very good exchange of experiences which benefit them and very much us as well, as we get all these acquaintances. But they are now unfortunately not for free for students from outside the European Union. And I guess some can have scholarships and so on, but this could easily be changed at a quite minor cost, actually, taking this back, to mention something very concrete. Okay. I don't know, can I say something about the corporations and economies?
Yeah, I just feel sorry for Laura listening to us the whole time. And are you hearing me, Laura? Okay. Is it okay if I ask her?
I can hear you.
Great. So you said that you did think that there was a genuine interest in recipient countries to sort of be a driver or take responsibility of the social protection systems. So let me then ask you this. Do you see models anywhere to sort of gradually shift then the financial responsibility for those protection schemes from the donors to the national governments? Because that's something we were talking about this morning, that they should claim sort of ownership and maybe use their growing tax revenues.
I think that's absolutely correct, that there needs to be ownership, first of all, at the outset, when these programs are being established or expanded or reformed. And there is a need for domestic financing, which can be built in gradually. And I fully agree with the comment of the need to expand the tax base. So often this can be done and facilitated through donor cooperation and a longer-term view toward how the financing can be shifted toward more domestic resources. It's going to be more feasible in certain countries than others, but many, particularly low-income clients of the World Banks, do not borrow for ongoing expenses such as the direct cost of the transfers. We are often more involved both with our lending and our technical assistance in building the infrastructure and launching the reforms, except in the case of crises, when often, as you saw, our lending spikes. But that, I think, is to be expected given the cyclicality of crises.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question for you, and this is a very provocative one, but given the fact that unconditional aid is being scrutinized and questioned, and I meet Africans who say that Africa is now developing despite aid, but not thanks to aid, could this whole business now with cash transfers be a way that the aid industry is sort of trying to reinvent itself?
I think the aid industry is not going to go away, and I think it will always be about more than cash transfers. I think what's interesting is to look at how cash transfers fit into a broader approach to social protection, because cash transfers are often carried out in terms of that second pillar, in terms of equity. If you can make improvements in resilience before the need for cash transfers, and also in the area of opportunity, so that people have access to jobs, people's skills are built, that in fact could lessen the dependency for social assistance.
Okay, thank you. I will now open the floor to questions. Is there anyone here who... Okay, can you wait for the microphone? Thank you. And can you please start by saying who the question is for?
Yes, my name is Fredrik Westerberg, and I have no special question to a special person. But Uhuru Dempers here, he didn't mention anything about that alcoholism had increased. So I don't think there is scientific evidence for increased abuse of drugs or alcohol.
Is that a question?
Yes, yes. Do you have any evidence for that? Or perhaps it's like other positive effects, decreased criminality, increased education, increased interest and activity in the healthcare system, as Uhuru mentioned, from Namibia. So what about the alcoholism?
So maybe
I see no evidence for that, but
okay,
do you?
I hear that's your opinion, but Anna-Lisa Conte,
Yes,
what is your experience given the large field where you have tried this? Have you seen a sort of increase, for instance, in alcohol abuse?
Not that I'm aware of. As I said during my presentation, there is no doubt that there are situations where you can have some individuals that are abusing the use of this assistance. But my position is that the people that we are assisting, typically it is a minority of the population of a given country. Therefore, why should we expect that that minority is behaving completely different from the rest of the population? So if alcoholism, for instance, is a major issue in a country, there perhaps that should be taken into account. But if it is, yes, something that is present as it can be present in any other country, I don't think that...
Okay, sorry. I mean, I'm moving on, but I promised Annika to finalize her statement, so I will let you do that before I take the next question.
Okay, I just wanted to say that it's so important that we have this consistency between what's done, like in the European Union, these policies, the promotion of openness of markets, like free trade for big corporations. It must be fair trade instead. We must have regulations and laws that promote this for real, so we don't give aid with one hand and then we just do harm to developing countries with the other. So there we need to do a lot from the UN level down to the very local level, a focus on local economies. And I think it has been so interesting hearing about this today, and we could talk about this for many hours, I think.
Okay, now we have a question from Kerstin Jonsson-Sisse from SIDA.
Thank you. I have a question for Lars, and when I get the response, I have a comment. I would like to know if you can situate us how much or how big is the cash transfer program if you look at the whole portfolio, the whole budget for Rwanda, the country frame for this year?
The Swedish, sorry, the share to social protection as part of the Swedish country portfolio?
Yes. Yes.
We have an agreed annual contribution of 31 million Swedish crowns out of a total country framework of 180 million Swedish crowns. Last year we doubled that, more than doubled that contribution, so we paid out 68 million Swedish crowns, that's about 10 million US dollars. And that's a good illustration of the importance of results and communicating results. We could, in Rwanda, communicate to the Swedish government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and SIDA that a lot of support and is delivered and a lot of difference is made for poor peoples, the main target group for why we are in Rwanda at all. And when we ended up in a situation in the end of the last budget year with excess funds in the total budget, and SIDA and Minister of Foreign Affairs went out and asked, are there any needs anywhere? And we couldn't make a case. So yeah, that's a good illustration of when you can make a difference, you can attract more funds.
Okay, actually my comment was that we have a lot of focus now on cash transfer of course, since this seminar is about that. But what I would want you to say that the cash transfer program as such is one part and one activity of many others. You support other NGOs and you have other channels too. And the frozen support to Rwanda was actually, or is actually the support directly to the government, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct, of which social protection is one government program we support other government programs as well, that currently disbursements are frozen, and we support NGOs where the disbursements are not frozen. Okay, thank you. So Uhuru Dempers, you're next from Namibia.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Maybe an observation question.
To whom? To somebody?
To Laura.
To Laura.
Yes. I want to clarify that there is a radical shift at the World Bank and hopefully at its sister institution, the IMF, that the social protection as a means for development is endorsed by the bank. Because the language Laura is talking and the language that some of the officials we deal with at the country level is talking is very different. What the World Bank and IMF officers advise our government is against social protection. In Namibia, for example, they told government, this is not affordable. Don't even think about considering a basic income grant. So I want to hear if there is a radical shift in policy and how that reflects at the national level, at the interaction between the bank and our national governments. And secondly, I wanted to also make the comment that this generating this revenue base to sustain social protection at the national level demands a lot from the international development community. It demands seriously addressing issues around fair trade, trade justice. I mean, we are so constrained by expanding our revenues as a nation because there is so much protection from European governments, from other international governments of their corporations. Even meeting the basic labor laws or environmental laws or increasing taxes, there is such a strong alliance between the corporate and governments. I'm not saying all the governments, that it's so difficult to expand that local revenue base to be able to sustain social protection programs, which I think if it's well supported, if our national governments are well supported, they can generate enough revenues to be able to sustain the social protection programs.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, thank you. So the question is for Laura, and then we have time with one more question before the closing remarks, and I will ask you the same question as I asked the panel this morning. What will you take with you from today? Something, a new thought, something that you felt sort of enriched your comprehension? Laura, please.
Yes, I wanted to respond to the gentleman who is referring to the situation in Namibia. And first I wanted to clarify that the strategy, which I presented most of this morning, this afternoon for you, was strongly endorsed by the World Bank board just a few months ago. It was also a centerpiece of the World Bank IMF spring meetings. where again it received strong support. So I think there is a great deal of support for social protection as a key ingredient for inclusive growth. However, I want to point out that it's not the only ingredient for inclusive growth. And I think here some of the other elements that have been raised are extremely important. And I think it takes reforms not only in OECD countries and the developed world, but it will also take a series of other reforms beyond social protection in the developing world as well.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think the last question now will be from Solomon. Yes.
My question goes to Laura. I'd like to ask you on the World Bank experience on conditionality. In a number of African countries, for instance, the World Bank kind of pushed to put conditions on cash transfer program, while like UN agencies like UNICEF and I think also WFP to some extent, they kind of go with unconditional cash transfer. And the idea the World Bank tried to bring the experience of Latin Americans to Africa, but these are completely different contexts. So I just want to hear your opinion why you guys often push for conditions on cash transfer program. The second point is related to graduation strategy. What kind of thinking do you have in your policy about how you could start a program and then try to finalize and people graduate from that program and lead their own life? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. This is actually an area I've done quite a bit of work in. With respect to conditional cash transfers, indeed, the World Bank was very involved with those programs and remains so in Latin America. And that experience helped generate a very rich evidence base on the effectiveness of these programs in not only alleviating poverty, but in helping households make important investments in their children's health and education and nutrition. That evidence base has been a powerful driver for countries adopting similar programs. That's not to say that those programs are appropriate in all settings. Much of the experience with conditional cash transfers stems from Latin America and is derived from middle-income countries with a strong administrative system and pockets of poverty within a relatively wealthy but highly unequal society. That's not the case in many other countries in the world. So no one, I think, would endorse a one-size-fits-all approach. And indeed, tailoring approaches to country circumstances is an important part of our social protection strategy. As to your question on graduation, a key element of the systems focus that we feel is very promising today is precisely a way to have programs and assistance interact. For example, in helping people who are able to work develop skills and enter the labor market and reduce their dependence on social assistance transfers.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for speaking so slowly. It was very easy to hear you. Thank you. Okay, so it's time for the concluding remarks from the panel. Do you want to start?
Well, I think that some of the participants this morning have a little bit captured what I also will take with me from this seminar. It was very interesting to look at social protection as a universal way to achieve objectives, and then perhaps within the social protection to look at which tools should be applied for different population groups. So perhaps the cash transfer is one of the social protection groups to be applied for certain population groups. This being said, it was also quite interesting to hear the colleague talking about human rights and how these two areas will have somehow to find the common ground, perhaps not always easy, but if it was easy, it would have been already done.
Yes, of course, and less interesting. Lars Johansson from SIDA.
Yes, thank you. I think one of the more important things for me today was to take part of all the results from different programs, since I only work on Rwanda and have seen some of the goods being delivered there and the difference made there. It was inspiring to hear about social protection results and a wide range of results, development results as well. And it was interesting to hear about all these impact evaluation initiatives going on in Africa on different social protection programs that I was not aware of all, so I will follow that.
Thank you. Desiree?
Thank you very much. And, is this on?
Yes.
Yeah. I think in Sweden we often talk, when we talk about development aid, about PGU, how all the policies from different political areas are going to work together for efficient development aid. And I think today it seems like there are so many areas that have to be working together. We were talking here, I heard about that they had more food and they had more quality in the food. That was very interesting, I think, when they had the possibility to have the cash transfer system. And also how people can start saving money to invest. That is also very interesting, and it also needs a banking system, and how we maybe need new technology there, and how to use the technology for banking system. And also how the market, the good impact on market, someone said, and that is also important to have different experiences, how it affects the market. And also, of course, side effects about alcoholism, and also that maybe could say something about gender equality. And that has been a thing that was very interesting in Sweden for a long time ago, that how do we deal with that? And that, of course, is something that we have to be aware of, that side effects could be negative. But finally, I would like to say a conditionality and also leadership. Because if we don't have leaders, and it wasn't so much talk about different leaders and how we interact with the leaders in the different countries that we are going to help, and how they have to take responsibility and show how they're going to benefit for sustainable economies in their own country, and do all they can for both development in economy but also the political rights, so people can take part in the decision making about their future in their countries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Annika from the Green Party.
Yes, as I said, I think the results are very encouraging, that cash transfers, unconditional ones, work very well, and that the vast majority of people actually do benefit and do very good things when they get the possibilities and the preconditions, and very few turn into alcoholism and so on. What I would like to, and I think this should be guiding for our future policies, of course, in Sweden. Cash transfer is interesting, it has worked here, and it's very good, I think, if we can discuss this with our international partners. I would like to add, too, that we firmly believe in the Green Party that if we should have any credibility in the development agenda, we need to acknowledge the rich country's full responsibility to decrease its emission of greenhouse gases and fulfill the promises of financing both mitigation and adaptation. We in the Green Party fight for additional funding in the Swedish aid budget, so that money should not be taken from the ODA, since this is not aid but our way to try to repair damage. It's also very interesting to hear that cash transfers may help to make local economies and societies more resilient and also deal with climate change. Yes, and basic income. Yes, thank you. Very encouraging, very interesting, and I hope we'll see much more of this in Sweden and in other countries.
Thank you. And Laura, I don't know how much you've been able to hear, but do you want to make a closing remark?
Thank you. I have been able to hear. I appreciate the invitation, and I think it's wonderful that Sweden, with its history of social protection, continues to take such a strong interest in this area. And we look forward to your continued engagement and leadership in this area. I wanted to share two things that I think are some conclusions, realizing that I didn't have the benefit of participating fully in the conference. But the first conclusion is that cash transfers are but one element of a broader social protection system. And the second is that we will all benefit from increased collaboration and knowledge sharing in this area. And I think there's some very promising initiatives taking place, both in terms of expanding evaluations and valuing the exchange of knowledge, both South-South and South-North. So I would invite all of you to look at our website, which is listed on the last slide of my PowerPoint. There's additional information on our strategy. There are a number of background papers, including one on climate change and social protection, as well as social protection in low-income countries and social protection systems, all of which are germane to this conversation. So thank you very much. I'm sorry that technology was complicated, but we appreciate the invitation and the ability to participate.
Thank you so much. We have really truly heard you today. Thank you so much for being with us.